What did we do before smartphones? They do almost anything we need to do to run our busy lives, but remember the days of, hold on, let me get a pen and a paper. Well, don't we still every now and then need a pen or a pencil now and again? This is All Request History. If you've ever wondered about the history of, well, anything, you've come to the right place. Subscribe here, put your request in the comments, and you could be the next All Request History. Thanks this time to @Stevens3076 for requesting the history of writing instruments. Now, there have been discoveries of images on walls of cavemen since ancient civilizations. Archaeologists determined that cavemen and cavewomen have crushed berries or fruits to make a paste and then used their fingers to draw images on cave walls as a form of communication. They also used feathers from geese, swans, and even turkeys. Sometimes a small bundle of hair was tied tightly together and then used to brush images onto the surface. As civilization developed, this practice became a little more refined. Early tools included some bamboo pieces made into a stylus and used to scratch images onto the walls, or even clay tablets. That stick or stylus eventually was called a pencil, from the Latin word penicillius, which means little tail or brush. Now, depending on what most of us believe, pencils are not made of lead, they're made of graphite. This crystallized carbon ore was originally discovered near a lake in Southwaite, England around the 16th century. This graphite was poured into sticks and inserted into wooden holders to be used for writing. This creation worked for a while and only a little better than the feather or the horsehair brush. Around 1560, Italians Simonino and Lindiana Bercotti hollowed out a stick of juniper wood and filled it with graphite and a glue mixture. The stick was squared and flattened and was more of a permanent writing tool. This worked much better than the earlier predecessor. In fact, this 16th century technology is still the basic structure used to make pencils today. Some were still using a quill pen and an inkwell. Like the pencil, variations of the quill were developed but remained relatively the same for centuries. It wasn't until the 17th century when a metal tip was added. They were reinforced with a small amount of molten metal that was fused to the tip of the feather. This is thought to be the earliest predecessor of the fountain pen. Now, the early U.S. is known as a very industrial nation, and the development of writing instruments was no exception. In 1812, cabinet maker William Monroe from Concord, Mass. started producing the first pencils in the United States. He used graphite powder bound with clay to make them hold together and last longer. It took a long time to make them, but their popularity grew. About 20 years later, a pencil factory was built on the Neshoba River in Action, Mass. that used the river to power the mill. The automated production was much faster. The creator and the founder of the mill that began making these wooden graphite pencils was, you can't make this stuff up, Ebenezer Wood. In 1827, Joseph Dixon started a business named after himself, the Joseph Dixon Crucible Company in Jersey City, New Jersey. It became the largest producer of pencils in the U.S. However, Dixon did not patent the design or the process, so many imitators came along and continued making pencils to try and improve the design. In 1858, Hymen Lipman, a Philadelphia resident whose family immigrated from Jamaica, discovered a synthetic rubber that could remove marks made by pencils when rubbed against it. Yep, the eraser was born. Lipman, however, was smart enough to file for a patent, so on March 30th, 1858, Hymen Lipman is credited for the first patent for the pencil with an attached eraser. 4 years later, in what turned out to be a very smart decision, Lipman sold the patent to New York City businessman Joseph Rankendorfer for $100,000, and that's just over $3 million in today's money. Rackendorfer went on to sue another pencil company for making pencils infringing on his patent, but the court in the end ruled against him and declared that the original patent was null and void. And Lipman, well, as they say, he was laughing all the way to the bank. Pencil variations continued to be created, but technology remained relatively the same throughout the years. Heck, even Apple's iPad came with a stylus, like a pencil. A few notable variations to the pencil have been charcoal pencils, which is a less expensive solution using ground charcoal instead of graphite. Carbon, it's made of clay and carbon mixture with charcoal, vegetable matter, and oil. They wrote smoother and were a favorite for the artsy type. A grease pencil. It's made from wax and used for writing on a multitude of surfaces, especially glass. Those are the ones with the rolled paper that's opened with like that dental floss. And of course, colored pencils, which are, pencils made with colors. They're usually made from wax or oil mixed with colored dye. And now from pencils to pens. Quill pens and inkwells have been being used for centuries, but in 1884, a New York inventor, Louis Edison Waterman, conceived of the process of hollowing out the center of the quill or feather and then filling it with ink. He started the Waterman Pen Company. Since many quill pens were already tipped with a metal reinforcement, he put a little pinhole in the metal tip of the ink-filled quill, and that would dispense the ink smoothly on the writing surface. This was regarded as the first fountain pen. Only a few years later, John Loud from Weymouth, Massachusetts, he improved on Waterman's idea. At the end of the ink tube, he put a small ball bearing so it would roll freely to dispense the ink. On October 30th, 1888, Loud obtained a patent for the first ballpoint pen. This type of pen lasted quite a while. Even though they didn't really work that well, the tip would be subject to clogging and the ink would often smudge. It wasn't until 1938 any significant improvement was made on the pen. Hungarian newspaper journalist Laszlo Biro discovered that the quick-drying ink used in newspaper printing worked perfectly in his fountain pen, and it ended the clogging and smudging problem. After World War II, ironically, this German teamed up with a French inventor named Marcel Bic. They agreed on a business plan, and the Bic company purchased the patent and the technology created by Biro. Bic mass-produced them, made a cylinder out of clear plastic so you could see how much ink was in it, and he sold them in multi-packs. The Bic company is currently the largest manufacturer of disposable pens in the world, so obviously Biro and Bic's business deal was quite a success. I mean, who can forget the Bic click? Some other names you might recognize when talking about pens. In 1846 in Rhode Island, Richard Cross was a jeweler that started making castings for gold and silver pencils. He then began manufacturing pens and later passed on the Cross Pen Company to his son, Alonzo Cross. In 1888, George Stafford Parker started a pen company based on a curved plastic tube to prevent ink from dripping. It didn't really work that great, but the Parker Pen Company went on to develop their dual-fold fountain pen. It offered several colors and was made of high-quality materials. Parker is now, as you know, a leader of the industry. Where Bic focuses on affordability, Parker focuses on quality. Speaking of quality, at last check, you can get on eBay and for a little over $325,000, you can get an 18-karat gold 1995 Patron of Art 888 Regent. Yeah, introducing the high-caliber premium brand MontBlonc Pen Company. Founded in 1906 by Germans Klaus Johannes Voss, Alfred Niemehaus, and August Eberstein. This prestigious pen company quickly became a symbol of high-quality luxury pens. I mean, I guess the rich and famous need to have pens too. And rounding out arguably the top 5 pen companies in the world, in 1913, W.H. Schaeffer created a fountain pen with a pump attached to it to fill the cylinder with ink. It was the only one of its kind. Still making pens today, Schaeffer could probably be considered the middle of the road. Somewhere between the affordable Bic and the higher-end Parker pen is where you'll find Schaeffer pens. So you've probably had a pen in your hand today. You may have even used a pencil recently. We might be the height of the technology age, but it seems we will always have at least a little bit of a need for the old-school innovations of William Moore, Ebenezer Wood, Dixon, Lipman, Bic, Schaeffer, Cross, and Parker. And I gotta be honest, I really wouldn't mind writing a few pages with a really expensive MontBlonc. It just feels right. Well, thanks for checking in. Are you curious? You could subscribe here, put your requests in the comments, and you could be the next All Request History.